Okay, guys, James Barbour. I'm going to talk about the final layer in the Phantom of the Opera. The number one question I'm asked in the other video that I did was, what's it like to sing Music of the Night? And the second question I'm asked, because of what I did in the show, was, what did you do in the final layer? The final layer, for those of you who haven't seen the show, is the final scene at the end of the journey of the Phantom and Christine, where everything is culminated in this is one final moment where he pulls Christine into his final lair, and the end of the show happens there. So I'm going to explain it this way. So for those of you who know the show, you know what that scene is. For those of you who don't, in the Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom falls in love with Christine from afar. He teaches her how to sing. He becomes her mentor. And then things start to deconstruct because he actually falls in love with her. And I actually think Christine falls in love with him, not knowing who he is and not knowing who the internal person is. Now, the thing about the Phantom that we have to remember is that this was a man who was really, really distraught and hurt as a child, ridiculed. He has a facial deformity that came from something he was born with. And in those days, in the time that it still happens today, people point fingers at people because they're different, or they have, something that is different from somebody else. You have these guys coming back from overseas that have been fighting in the military, and they're missing a leg, and people stare at them. They're in a wheelchair. They may have some sort of, physical anomaly, or, kids with Down syndrome. People stare. And it's unfortunate because they're people, they're human beings. And what happened with the Phantom is that because he was ridiculed and he was put in this carnival environment as a child and pressed down, he ended up being this sort of demented guy and acted out his feelings in this show. So falls in love with Christine, finds at the end that he's not going to have her. She has fallen in love with Raoul and is distraught. So there's one final scene, which is an opera scene that he has written for her. And in that scene, she tears off his mask, tears off the wig that he wears to leave him exposed with his natural face, which is completely ripped apart. He's balding. He has alopecia. We call it in the show the alopecia wig. He's basically massively disfigured facially. And she's shocked. She had seen this part of his face before when the mask was pulled off, but she never realized that he was wearing a wig until just before this final lair. So he takes her into the final lair, and that is where this scene begins. The lair is where the Phantom lives. It's under in the bowels of the Paris Opera House. You have to follow a channel. He has a boat that he takes her to, and his organ is there, there's a mirror there, there's his chair there, all of the things that he had to live. And he basically had an homage to Christine, an homage meaning like he had a doll that he dressed up in a wedding dress that would emulate who she was, because that's his ultimate goal. He fell in love with this woman, was in love with her so much that he started doing things that were horrible to get her love, which is exactly the opposite of what you should do, right? So in the final lair, it's my favorite scene in the entire show. And for those of you who remember when I talked about Music of the Night, there's a structure in which phantoms have to stay, right? It has been the same for 30 years on Broadway, 31 years in London, where, Hal Prince made a structure directorially, Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote the music, and you stay within that structure, and that is what works. And you can create your own reality within that structure. But the freedom, as I said before, comes within the music, and it comes within the structure that has been created. Well, in the final layer, there's a little more freedom artistically. The blocking will be the same, but the choices that I made, to me, really, really made this a wonderful scene. So, first of all, the Phantom is broken down. He's completely lost everything that he had, that facade that he had, and he's pulling Christine in and basically forcing her to love him, forcing her to love him. Raoul comes in to save her. He puts Raoul in the Punjab lasso, which is the noose, and he's hanging basically by his throat. And the only way that he feels he can win is by controlling the situation and forcing people to do what he wants them to do. He's like a petulant child, this temper tantrum. I want my lunch. I want this toy, right? That's what he's doing. You will marry me, and if you don't marry me, then I'm going to kill him, right? That's basically what he's saying. Well, what's that going to do? If you think about it logically, he's killing the man that she loves. So why would she be happy? You know, all he really wants is for her to love him, right? So that's not going to work, right? But ultimately what happens is, and this is why I love it so much, is that there's this journey, right? This journey that he goes on where he's got Raoul in the noose. He's forcing Christine to say, listen, this is what you must do. He, puts her in the wedding dress. He, hands her the veil, and she finally says, she's like, no, you're not going to do this, and she calls him on it. She calls him and says, listen, I am not going to do this. She says, you're a horrible individual. Look what you've done. I am not going to do this. And for once, she stands up for herself. She takes control of her life and she says no, right? And he doesn't know what to do. And he throws himself into the chair and he says, make your choice. Either choose me or he's going to die. And there really is no choice. It's basically, if you marry me, I'll let him go. And if you don't, I'm going to kill him, right? It's a very, very, very hard thing because she's in love with Raoul. He's hanging there. And ultimately, she makes the decision to show the phantom love. And she turns him around and she kisses him passionately. And for the first time in his life, he feels compassion, he feels love, and he feels somebody actually caring for him on a deep, visceral level. He finally gets freedom. And the kiss, they break away. He crosses the stage over to his organ, and on the organ it's filled with candles, and he picks up this candle and he starts to go for Raoul, and Christine says, no, don't hurt him. And he basically says, stop, stay where you are. And you think that he's going to hurt Raoul, but he doesn't. What in effect he does is he pushes the candle and it shoots a flame, ignites the lasso and breaks the lasso and drops Raoul down to freedom and saves him. And he basically tells Christine and Raoul to go, get out. And he lets them have their life. He realizes that what he has done, this entire journey of his gestation with Christine, has been wrong. And the only way for redemption is to let them go. And so he lets them go, and the monkey, the little music block, starts playing. And, he says, masquerade, hide your face so the world will never find you. And in my mind, what I never talked about was, why does that music box mean so much? Why does he keep that music box? And for me, I created a story in my head that's a toy that was given to him when he was a child. And he had it from very, very, very early on. The only thing that he could talk to was this inanimate object, this music box. It's the only friend he ever had, right? And so he comes back to it, and he puts his hand over the face of the monkey. Hide your face so the world will never find you. And he's going to go back into hiding. He realizes, what have I done? And in comes Christine. He can feel her. And he turns, hopeful, and she hands him the ring that used to be on his finger that he gave to her. And again, everything is ripped apart. He's torn apart. And so to me, it is the ultimate in forgiveness. It's the ultimate in redemption both ways. Christine forgives him. He lets them go, and he realizes at the end that the choices he made were not necessarily the best choices. So how can he redeem himself in the eyes of the woman that he loves? Well, he can do that by letting her go and have the life that she really wants to have. And it's such a poignant scene, and it's my favorite scene in the entire show. And artistically, I was given a little more freedom to work with that. And so that's my story of The Final Lair. If you guys have any questions about it that you want me to answer, let me know. I kind of went through it quickly, but that for me is what it is. And I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, guys, talk to you soon.